early afternoon when neighbors suddenly heard desperate screams coming from one of the homes. "Help! Please help!" But by the time anyone managed to reach the house, it was already too late. A 28-year-old woman was lying at the bottom of the staircase, severely burned, while her 6-year-old son, the only eyewitness, stood frozen in shock. The woman was Nikki Bhati, also referred to as Nikki Pyle in some reports. She was a homemaker, a loving wife, and a devoted mother. So what had happened in her 9-year marriage that her life ended in such a terrifying way? And why did her husband, after his arrest, coldly say, "I don't feel sorry at all"? Nikki's little son gave a statement later. "Papa threw something on Mama, then Uncle hit her, then they lit a lighter." Nikki was born into a middle-class family. Her father, Bhati Singh, was an honest and hardworking man who adored his daughters and would do anything for them. Nikki grew up as a caring, affectionate girl, the heart of her family. In November 2016, when Nikki was just 19, she married Vipin Bhati in an arranged marriage. On the same day, her sister Kanchan was also married into the Bhati family, to Vipin's brother, Rohit Bhati. Both sisters became daughters-in-law of the same home. Nikki's parents happily accepted the marriage and, wanting to keep the groom's family satisfied, agreed to all dowry demands. They gave the Bhati family a Scorpio SUV, a Royal Enfield bike, gold jewelry, and cash, far beyond what they could realistically afford. But her father still did it, believing he was securing his daughter's happiness. Nikki herself was simple and soft-spoken. After marriage, her biggest dream was just to have a peaceful family life. In 2018, she gave birth to a son, who became the center of her world. Like every mother, she became fully dedicated to his upbringing. In the beginning, Nikki felt a little nervous moving into a new house, but she found comfort in the fact that her sister Kanchan also lived there. It felt like destiny, that they were meant to stay close as they began their new lives. But the house that should have been a new beginning slowly turned into a nightmare. On the surface, the Bhati family looked like a normal middle-class joint family. Vipin appeared to be an ordinary, family-oriented man in photos. The family included Vipin's father, Satyavir Bhati, his mother, Daya Bhati, and his brother, Rohit. But behind closed doors, the reality was completely different. According to Nikki's family, the Bhatis began demanding more dowry immediately after the wedding, an additional 33 to 36 lakh rupees. At first, the threats were subtle, but they soon escalated into emotional abuse, then physical violence. Not only Nikki, even Kanchan faced the same harassment in the very same house. Both sisters were beaten multiple times over the span of 9 years. The Bhati family repeatedly called Nikki's parents demanding more money, more gold, more upgrades to the vehicles. Something new every time. Shockingly, the men in the Bhati family had no stable source of income. Only the father, Satyavir, sat at their small shop. Vipin had no job, no business, yet constantly demanded more money from Nikki's parents. Nikki and her sister tried to support the household financially by running a small beauty parlor. But according to Kanchan, Vipin hated the idea of them working. He often barged into the parlor, created scenes in front of customers, and once even got into a physical argument with one of the clients. This ruined the parlor's reputation, and the sisters lost many customers because of his behavior. Despite all this, Nikki continued trying to make the marriage work, mostly because both families kept telling her, "Every marriage has problems. Things will get better. Just tolerate for now." Additionally, in their community, even uttering the word divorce was considered shameful. So Nikki suppressed her suffering, hoping someday things would improve. She and Kanchan wished for only one thing, that their husbands would stop fighting, let them work, and allow them to live peacefully. But things went from bad to worse. In 2024, Nikki learned that Vipin was having an extramarital affair. He was spotted in Delhi with another woman and was beaten by locals there. This incident revealed more secrets. Both Vipin and Rohit were allegedly involved with multiple women, spent their time drinking, and frequently beat their wives when they returned home. Even their mother, Daya Bhati, instead of stopping the abuse, often humiliated Nikki by taunting her for bringing too little dowry. Some reports even suggest that the additional 33 to 36 lakh rupees were demanded directly by Daya. Rohit, the brother-in-law, was also involved, not only in the harassment but in the pressure that the entire family placed on Nikki. She lived under constant fear. By mid-2024, Nikki's marriage had completely fallen apart. She had stopped expecting affection, respect, or even basic kindness from Vipin. Her only reason to stay was her young son. She didn't want him to grow up without a father. But even that hope was fading. Vipin's behavior grew more aggressive, unpredictable, and controlling. According to her sister Kanchan, he would often take Nikki's earnings, criticize her for small things, and threaten her whenever she mentioned leaving. He constantly reminded her that she had nowhere else to go, knowing she feared being judged if she returned to her parents' house. Nikki's parents, meanwhile, kept asking her to come home, telling her that nothing mattered more than her safety. But she always replied the same way. "It's okay. I'm trying. Maybe he'll change someday." In early 2025, Nikki made one last attempt to save her marriage. She visited her parents and confessed everything: the harassment, the violence, the extramarital affairs. Her father was devastated and told her, "Beta, you don't need to stay there anymore. Just come back home." But Nikki requested a little more time to think, saying she would make a decision soon. That decision came much faster than anyone expected. On August 20th, 2025, Nikki called her sister Kanchan and said she felt something was wrong in the house. Vipin had been angry since morning, accusing her of disrespecting him, blaming her for financial problems, and threatening her again over money. She sounded scared on the phone, but she tried to stay calm for her son. That night, she put him to bed early and spent the rest of the evening quietly, hoping the tension would fade. But the next day, everything spiraled out of control. August 21st, 2025, 11:30 a.m. Nikki was finishing household chores while her husband and in-laws were in the living room. The arguments began again. First quietly, then louder, then violent. Neighbors later said they heard shouting coming from the house, but no one imagined what was about to happen. According to the police investigation, an aggressive confrontation took place between Nikki and her in-laws. She stood her ground for once, telling them she wouldn't ask her parents for more money. This enraged Vipin and his family even more. Minutes later, Nikki's 6-year-old son witnessed something that changed his life forever. The police later recorded the child's trembling statement. "Papa threw something on Mama. Then Uncle hit her. Then, lighter." These small, broken words were enough to reveal the truth. At 12:10 p.m., neighbors heard Nikki screaming in panic. When they rushed outside, they saw smoke coming from the staircase area of the body house. By the time they reached her, Nikki was lying unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. Her body was severely burned, and she was barely breathing. Vipin and his family, instead of helping, had locked themselves inside a room. The neighbors immediately called for help. Nikki was taken to a private hospital first, but the doctors quickly realized how serious her condition was and referred her to Delhi's Safdarjung Hospital, known for handling severe burn cases. Kanchan rushed there as soon as she heard the news. When she saw her sister on the hospital bed, covered in tubes and bandages, she collapsed in tears. Nikki was unable to speak at all. Her body had endured more pain than anyone could imagine. She drifted between consciousness and silence, trying to survive but losing strength every hour. Her parents arrived soon after, completely shattered. Her father, seeing her condition, cried uncontrollably. He kept saying, "Why didn't you come home, Beta? I told you, I would have taken care of everything." Despite the doctor's efforts, Nikki's condition continued to worsen. The burns were too extensive, and her body couldn't recover. Her son stood near the bed, confused and terrified. He didn't fully understand what had happened. He only knew his mother wasn't waking up. In the early hours of the next morning, Nikki succumbed to her injuries. The moment Kanchan heard the news, she screamed so loudly that nurses came running. She kept repeating the same lines over and over. "My sister never hurt anyone. Why did they do this to her?" Her parents were devastated beyond words. A daughter they had raised with love, a girl who only wanted a peaceful home, had been taken from them in the most heartbreaking way. But the tragedy didn't end there, because the truth was about to come out, directly from someone the Bhati family could never silence. The police reached Safdarjung Hospital early in the morning after receiving the distress call. By then, Nikki had already passed away, and her family was still trying to process the shock. Officers gently asked if anyone from the family could give an initial statement. Kanchan stepped forward, her hands shaking, but her voice determined. She told them everything: the harassment, the money demands, the threats, and how Nikki had been terrified the night before. She also mentioned the most critical evidence of all. Nikki's son had witnessed the attack. Hearing that, the officers realized this case wasn't a simple domestic accident. They immediately headed to the Bhati house to secure the crime scene. When the police reached Vipin's home, the first thing they saw was the staircase area marked with burned stains and scattered household items. The place didn't look like an accident, it looked like chaos. The officers photographed everything: the broken glass near the stairs, the burnt cloth scraps, and the signs of a rushed cleanup attempt in the bathroom sink. Vipin and his family did not try to escape. Instead, they acted overwhelmed, dramatic, and defensive. Vipin kept repeating that Nikki had fallen down with the stove accidentally, a story that even the officers found hard to believe. His mother claimed she was in another room and heard nothing. His brother insisted they were innocent, but none of their statements aligned with each other. The police took them to the station for questioning, and that's where their story began to crumble. Meanwhile, Nikki's son, the only eyewitness, was brought in gently by child counselors trained to handle trauma. They gave him toys, calming exercises, and spoke to him softly. Once he felt safe, he began telling the truth in short, hesitant sentences. He told the officers that an argument had started. He described his father yelling, his grandmother blaming Nikki again for money issues, and his uncle pushing her near the stairs. Then he mentioned that someone threw something flammable on her. The child paused often, struggling to remember through fear, but he clung to one detail: his mother screaming for help. Each statement from him was quietly recorded. Every word was painful, but it was crucial. This was the testimony that changed the direction of the entire investigation. When the officers confronted Vipin with the child's words, he grew nervous. He kept insisting that the boy was confused, but the police noticed something else. Vipin couldn't explain why his family didn't take Nikki to the hospital immediately. He couldn't explain why neighbors, not the family, called for help. And he certainly couldn't explain the burn stains found in multiple rooms. Meanwhile, forensics began their examination. They found traces of accelerant on the staircase and on pieces of Nikki's clothing. The pattern of the burns didn't match a fall or accident. It showed a deliberate act, a targeted attack. When the forensic team submitted their preliminary findings, the officers had enough evidence to move forward. By evening, Vipin, his mother, and his brother were formally arrested. Kanchan broke down when she heard the news, not out of relief, but out of grief. Nothing could bring Nikki back, but at least justice had begun. Nikki's father sat outside the police station silently, staring at the ground. Hours later, he finally said just one line: "My daughter kept saying things would get better, but they never did." Her son was taken into protective custody with relatives who promised to raise him with love and safety. The little boy still asked about his mother every night, not understanding why she wasn't coming home. As days passed, the case began gaining attention. Women's rights groups raised questions about why Nikki's earlier complaints weren't taken seriously. Neighbors testified about hearing constant fights. Nikki's co-workers mentioned how she often came to work quietly, hiding her tears. The courtroom eventually heard every detail: the financial pressure, the abuse, the threats, and the final act of violence. The judge called it a case of prolonged cruelty that ended in a tragic and preventable death. For her family, justice would never erase the loss. But the arrest ensured that Nikki's story would not be silenced, and that her son would grow up knowing that the truth was protected. In the end, Nikki's case became a reminder that many victims remain trapped in abusive homes because they hope things will change. Sometimes that hope becomes their biggest vulnerability. And as Nikki's father said during the final hearing, my daughter wasn't weak. She was patient. Too patient. Stories like these remind us that when love turns into fear, when a home becomes a prison, and when someone's cries go unheard, the consequences are always tragic. It is a reminder to speak up, support survivors, and never ignore the silent battles someone may be fighting behind closed doors.